Hello, Ben. I am so happy to talk to you after 4 years. Last time we talked, I had recently started my business. I was figuring it all out, applied to the Success Magazine podcast to be able to ask some questions. And originally, I was supposed to speak to Rory Vaden, but then something happened, and you ended up being the host. And do you remember that?
Absolutely, I do. Absolutely.
Yeah, that was 4 years ago. Time flies by too fast.
No kidding. That doesn't seem that long ago. But yeah, I remember it like it was yesterday.
Yeah. Anyways, I am so glad to have you here today on the show, and I wanted to thank you for taking time to be here. And to start, I would love for you to give us a brief introduction about yourself. How is it that an air traffic controller ended up being a John Maxwell certified coach and speaker, then working at Success Magazine and achieving high positions in real estate such as Keller Williams and Remax?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a big question, so I'll make it succinct. But yeah, so was born and raised in the US in North Idaho and was an air traffic controller and pilot and had my placement set for Chicago. I didn't want to move, didn't want to leave. We lifestyle wise, we love where we live and so one of my best clients at the time was the number one agent in the world for Century 21. And so he talked me into real estate. He said, "Go get your license. You're going to be great at this." And so I did. And that was 21 years ago. Got into the business just based on not wanting to move, knowing that I could make the money I wanted to make selling real estate. And got into it, had good success, but realized I liked the leadership side a little bit better. I liked impacting people more than trading time for dollars and closing the sale one after the other. And so went down that path and have just been really blessed and fortunate to have a lot of opportunities open up through the years and really tend to focus on coaching, leadership, and value proposition and client attraction. So that's really where that journey's taken me. And I've been fortunate to work for the founders of Keller Williams and Remax and EXP, a number of different companies. That's who owns Success. That's how we met, which was cool. And so just a wonderful, wonderful 20 years of a journey and a path I wasn't counting on, but I've learned a ton. And like all of us, I think that realizing more and more every day what I don't know and just on a path to keep growing and learning.
And what do you think is your biggest passion of all after being in all those positions, different positions?
Biggest passion for me, the biggest driver is impact, right? Because throughout my career, there's always a path to make more money in sales. If somebody is good with people, if somebody can connect well with people, communicate effectively, there's always a way you can make more money on the sales side of the business. But for me, and again, nothing against sales. I love salespeople and I love helping salespeople. But for me personally, that doesn't fill my bucket, right? That isn't fulfilling to me. And so being able to impact people, seeing a light turn on, really kind of an idea pop, and seeing meaningful growth in people or in their business, that's really what has juiced me. And so my growth, I have a lot of friends in the sales side, and they've always asked me, like, why don't you get back over here? You'll make twice as much money. But it was never about that. And now I'm seeing after all those years, like I've grown because of helping other people. There's a famous saying that says if you want to learn something at the highest level possible, you need to go teach it. Because
Right.
if you and I go to teach something, we're going to study it, know it, learn it, eat it, sleep it, breathe it. Like we're going to know it at a level higher than 95% of the rest of the world's population. And that's the benefit of being in a servant leadership position, at least in my experiences, is putting yourself in that position to help others. You're growing actually more than they are. Right. And so it all comes down to heart orientation, but that's why I aligned with John Maxwell. I love his stuff. I always have. But really his servant leadership training, like how do I actually help people? Not because of what I'm going to get, but Zig Ziglar is a famous guy in the US, and he said years ago, he said, when you help enough other people get what they want, you'll always get what you want. And that's just been true in my 20 plus year career is that when I'm focused on everyone else, it always ends up working out for me. Like I don't ever have to worry about what am I going to get out of it because I'm growing personally, I'm growing professionally, I'm impacting people, which is fulfilling to me along the way. And opportunities then continue to show up as a result. So it's been an incredible journey, and I feel like I'm just getting started.
Love this. And this is exactly what I wanted to talk about, leadership. There's no doubt that John Maxwell is one of the most known people of our times, who's recognized as a leader, leading expert in leadership. What has been your biggest takeaway after being a John Maxwell certified coach and speaker?
Hmm. I have to say the number one thing I've always admired about him, but the more you get to know him as a human, as a person, you see that how truly humble he is, and that's what's always stood out to me. I think that a lot of times we see people on social media, we see them on a stage, or we hear them on a podcast, or whatever, and we kind of, at least me, I don't know about you, but I'm always a little skeptical because I feel like everyone's kind of putting their best face forward. They're wearing their mask. They're being or portraying who they think people want to hear or want them to be. And what I've always respected about John is that he is the same guy one on one as he is in front of thousands of people on a stage. He genuinely cares for the people in his stead. He genuinely lives what it is he's teaching. And so for me, that's what really stood out was the authenticity. I mean, I made a post this morning that really comes down like leadership really is just being authentic between what you say and what you do, right? Because there's a lot of talking heads. There's no shortage of people that have ideas and can say the quotes that get people to stop in their tracks and think and like and heart and all that stuff. That isn't leadership. Leadership is when there's congruency between what somebody says and how they actually live, like how they actually show up in the workplace, leading people through good times, through bad times. So for me, that's the number one thing I always respected the most about him was just his authenticity and his humility and how he shows up.
Love it. Can you name a person who has a tremendous impact on you as a leader, maybe a mentor, and how did this person impact your life?
Mm. Yeah, so that's an easy one. First comes to mind. So it was actually a former business partner of mine. Her name was Marie Pickford, and unfortunately, she passed away much too soon. But she was an incredible, incredible person. And I learned a long time ago, and she taught me a lot of this, right? That when you're looking to grow and develop, I'll go back to Maxwell first. He talks about the law of the lid in the 15 irrefutable laws. And so the law of the lid states that the higher the leader goes, the bigger gap he produces behind him to draw up and bring up people behind him, right? Because leaders should be producing or reproducing other leaders. That's the sign of a true leader. If somebody's just in it for themselves, they're on a journey, but there's nobody following them. There's nobody growing behind them. There's nobody getting better behind them or as a result of being in their world. And so I'd heard him say that a long time ago. And it wasn't until I got into business with Marie. She was just an incredible leader, came up in the day, at least in the United States, right, where some jobs were just not all that easy to get for females back in the day, right, and especially in leadership positions. And she was just tough as nails. I love her to death, and she just pushed through it. And she had great success because she genuinely cared about people. She didn't listen to what society said. She didn't allow boundaries or limitations to be set around her. She'd just go break them and do it anyway. And so working with her, that's the number one person that probably had the biggest impact on me because as we were growing a company that she owned for her, which we had very big success with, but she was always fighting for me to carve out time to get better as a leader. She was always fighting for me. Like that's where I first went to the John Maxwell seminar. One year I deferred a raise and had them pay to send me to Orlando with her to go through the certification training. And so she was just always fighting and really proving to me how important it was for leaders to carve out time for ourselves. Because the flip side of the coin, right? You can be the leader that doesn't care about anybody. That's not good. But you can be the leader that cares so much about everybody that you don't fill your own bucket. And eventually you're drawing out of this bucket or this well for everyone else. And eventually you hit the bottom because you're not replenishing that bucket for yourself. And she really taught me the lesson of the importance of both, that if I'm going to be good to everybody around me, I need to purposely carve out time so that I'm putting good stuff inside of me, refilling my bucket so that I have something to give to the people around me. So she was definitely a remarkable, remarkable influence.
Amazing. And your favorite leader of all times?
I don't know if I can quantify it to one. Like I think we're in a world right now that has a huge lack of leadership, but we also have a number of really good leaders, right? And
Right.
so I think it's with social media, it's harder maybe for people to distinguish between authentic leadership and stage leadership. But for me, I think a lot of people, if asked that question, would go to some big name. For me, it's the folks that are not on the stage. It's the ones who are leading their people well, who don't get the recognition. They're not in the spotlight. Every team I've ever run, the best leaders were actually on my team and reported to me. It wasn't me, right? And so that's a different dichotomy on leadership. But best leaders of all time, I think, are oftentimes, unfortunately, the ones that don't get as much recognition for what they do as they should.
Awesome. How do you define leadership?
The leadership, there's lots of definitions, but for me, the biggest thing about leadership is a solid leader is someone that helps people discover what's possible. Now, that could be possible
Okay.
for them individually. It could be possible for them as a work group. It could be what's possible for them as a company. But a leader has to inspire the what's possible conversation, right? There's plenty of people in this world that operate on the confines of what's been done before. Like they determine what's possible based on what's been done before. The problem with that is everything was impossible until it was done before, right? It reminds me of the Roger Bannister story. Have you heard that story?
No?
So Roger Bannister, check it out, your readers, listeners, you as well. It's a great story, but it's a true story. So Roger Bannister was the first person ever in the world to run a mile in under 4 minutes.
Oh, yeah.
And before that point, everyone said it was impossible. Doctors, physicists, like all like the world's smartest people said it's not possible, right? Until Roger proved that it was. And then within the year after he proved that it was possible, multiple other people were able to accomplish the same thing. A leader is that person that can kind of break down the barriers of what people think is possible and inspire them to see maybe there's something possible that just hasn't been accomplished yet. In my mind, that's the biggest component of leadership.
And do you think they're born or they are made?
No, not born at all. Leadership is a learned skill, and John Maxwell is a big proponent of that as well. Everybody is born, but this idea that somebody's a naturally born leader, I think, is preposterous because everyone's born with the same baseline. Leaders are the ones who have the heart orientation towards others and then just pour themselves in to personal and professional development, but for the reason of impacting other people, right? So it's a learned skill. The good news is everybody can be a leader. The bad news is a lot of people choose not to believe that. A lot of people choose just to kind of hang out and shrink back into their position or their world. And we'd all be better for it if more people would lean into that and start growing themselves so they could pour into other people.
Right. Is it easier for extroverts to become leaders than introverts? What challenges do you think each
Mm.
personality type must overcome to become a good leader?
Yeah, good question. So this is just personal opinion, but so I'm a master practitioner on neurolinguistic programming. I'm also certified in the DISC behavior profile. And so I'm going to hit this from both of those angles, but specifically the DISC profile. So a very outgoing person, a big extrovert. On the DISC profile, for those that are familiar, we would categorize that person as a high I, right? They're the ones that everybody notices when they walk in the room. They're the one that everybody notices when they leave the room. These are the people that wear bright colors, flashy jewelry, like they drive the really shiny and fancy cars. It's not because they're necessarily egotistic, some of them are, but it's because they really care a lot about what people think, right? The joke is with a high I is that they've never met a stranger. It's just a friend they haven't yet met. So like they just want to be everybody's everybody. In my world, at least in the coaching side and the consulting side, those people, to your point, the very outgoing people, sometimes have the most difficult time in leadership because it's very
Really?
difficult for them to make a hard decision. It can be difficult for them to have a hard conversation. It's not impossible, but it just goes against who they are naturally. It doesn't mean they can't do it, but it's just not comfortable for them, right? And so, to me, the high eyes, the very social, very extroverted people, they're a good face person for a company. They can definitely get consensus. They love their people truly. The challenge sometimes though is they're so busy loving their people they can be loving them right out of the business, or they can be loving them right out of a job, and then they don't know what to do when they get to that decision point of having to have a hard conversation. So I think they're definitely developed, not born. I think introverts, extroverts, I've seen both be very successful leaders, but it really comes down to having a balance between loving my people, but then we also know that as a leader sometimes loving them means telling them what they don't want to hear, right? That's the premise of coaching. It's not that I don't care for you. I'm going to tell you, I have to tell you what maybe you're not seeing, choosing not to see, or don't want to hear. I have to tell you because I care so much about you. And so I think a good leader is probably a balance between the extroverted and introverted. There was a study, and I don't remember the numbers, but Harvard Business Review did it, and they talked about the success rate in leaders. And the biggest group they saw that had some of the highest success were actually extroverted introverts. And so it kind of speaks to what I'm talking about, right? It's people who are, if you look, like I get that all the time when I'm on a stage. People say, "Oh, you must just love this," and I'll do a presentation, I'll do a talk, and then all of a sudden I disappear, and people can't figure it out because they all want to go have after party, they want to go have a cocktail, right? They want to go socialize. I'm an extroverted introvert. Like I can do it for a period of time, but it drains my battery. It doesn't fill it. So I think the best leaders figure out how to have a balance of both. You have to be a people person, but you also have to be able to make decisions, tough decisions, fast decisions, trust your gut, and move forward. Otherwise, you're just kind of going in a circle.
Love it. And what are top three leadership traits?
Oh, well, for me, anytime I'm hiring anybody on my team, number one thing that has to be there first, regardless of position, is integrity. Because if we're not aligned in our values and our integrity, nothing else matters. Now, there are a lot of leaders who are very effective, very smart, very talented. But if we're not in alignment in integrity, then they're not going to be on my team, right? Because that means we're not going to treat the customer, the people, we're not going to always do what I think is the right thing. And so integrity to me is number one. I think number two is follow through. And I'm sure you've worked in companies like this as well, but one of the pet peeves for me is when you work for a leader who says one thing and either doesn't do it or does something completely different, right? So it's touches on integrity, but it's bigger than that. It's follow through. It's doing what you said you're going to do when you said you're going to do it. And then third, I think it's the ability to make those tough conversations. It comes down to courage, right? It's hard to be a leader most of the time. Everyone
Right.
loves the idea of being a leader because they love the title, they love the accolades, they think you're going to make a bunch of money. Like they see all the stuff that the world says about leadership. But anybody
Right.
that's actually been a leader in a company understands it's very lonely and it's very scary. Right. And so I think courage comes into play too. So I think those would be the three in the order that they come to my mind.
Right. And what's the difference between management and leadership?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I'm actually working a consulting project for a company right now, and I see this dichotomy showing up in the sense that management is telling people what to do. Leadership is helping people figure out what they should do. Right? So leadership is I'm going on a journey with people. Now this requires I have to have the right team around me. Now that there's again we could go on for hours, which we won't, but there's a whole other side to that too for leaders stepping into a team that they inherited versus one that they picked. That can be a challenge because you may not have the right people in the right seats going on this journey on this bus. But I think management is really a checklist. It's telling people what to do. The problem with that is you're not recreating yourself. And at some point, if you're just being a manager, you hit a threshold because it's being built on you. And I work with business owners on this quite often. It's probably one of the more common things is they start an entrepreneur, right? You're an entrepreneur. We start a company, we start a thing, we have the passion, the love, the heart, the blood, the sweat, the tears, like all of it. No one else understands what that's like other than us for this business because we were here at day one and all of a sudden we start scaling a business. The problem is if we can't let go and let talented people take it where it wants to go, it's only going to go so far. We're going to hit a ceiling, right? What Maxwell calls a ceiling of achievement. We're going to hit a ceiling, and no matter what we try, if it's just built on us, it's never going to get past that. Great companies scale by understanding that I can lead and keep the core of the company, the heart of the company, the mission of the company. I can keep all of that true and center, but I can also let go of pieces. And leadership requires letting go. Leadership means I'm finding talented people and I'm going to empower them to do what they do best. I don't need to micromanage them. I don't need to second guess them. I'm going to keep them aligned on the big things, but how we get to where we're going to go, how we get to the goals I set and the vision that I'm casting as the leader, that's up to them and they're accountable for it. But what I've seen in my own businesses and in the businesses of those that I've helped, when leaders actually empower people on their team and they get out of the way, the outcome, the result is better than it would have been if it was just the one person being a manager or trying to hold on to everything because they have fear around what happens if I don't, versus the leaders who set a vision, hold people accountable, and empower their people. Big things happen when leaders show up.
Love this. And what do people misunderstand about leadership? Like,
Oh,
what do people most commonly misunderstand
yeah.
about leadership?
I think there's a lot of stuff they misunderstand. A couple of things that come to mind. The first one I think kind of like what we touched on is that leadership is easy. Now, poor leaders have an easy job because poor leaders, people who aren't good leaders, can get into roles and they just don't do much. I've worked for people like that too, and that's frustrating, right? I think the right leaders, good leaders, you work more as a leader. You care more. It takes more out of you when you're effectively leading a group of people because you genuinely care about these people. And so I think the first one is that you arrive when you get there. And it ties into the second one that misconception is once I get to that position, I can stop growing. I can stop pushing. I don't have to challenge myself. Like I've arrived. Well, the people who have the mentality that they've arrived, they're already starting to slide backwards. They're becoming less relevant in the marketplace. They're bringing less to the company, and for their own career, their career value is going down every single day, right? So I think some people see it as like an ultimate goal or a destination, and in reality, I see leadership as just another step on this journey in this process of becoming the best version of who we can be. Leadership isn't a title. Maxwell's famous for saying this too. He said titles are, he has this thing about titles. He said titles, they won't help you if you're not good enough. And if you're good enough, you don't need one, right? So a lot of people also confuse leadership with a title. Like if I just get that vice president or CEO designation or title, then I'm a leader. No, there's lots of people in this world who have those titles who are terrible leaders, right? Well, if I just get to this pay increase or if I just get to this one thing, it's not a destination. Leadership is a process of becoming the best version you can be. And then leaders, like we talked about, bring other people with them on the journey. So as they're growing, they're pouring into people around them, their direct reports to create more leaders. They're always producing themselves. And that's true for good companies and bad. And I'm sure you've seen this, but leaders always reproduce who they are. And so good leaders have typically some good leaders around them and leaders who are growing and developing. And bad leaders typically are like attracts like. They have bad leaders around them. They have people that mimic their habits or they'll pull people in because it feels comfortable because they'll say yes to bad ideas, right? So leaders always reproduce who they are, but I think those are some of the bigger misconceptions for sure.
Who did you need it to become in order to become the leader you are now from where you started?
Um, I think the first step I had to, because when we're young, we're invincible, right, in our own minds. And when we're young, we're pretty brilliant. All you had to do was ask us when we were younger. And I had to get to the point where I realized that there were people who have gone on this journey long before me, who achieved more than I may in my lifetime and my career. And so I can either, because of pride and ego, hold on to the fact that I need to figure it out, or I can almost remember the exact time. Like I can then decide to become a student. I can forget everything I think I know. I can just become a student and a sponge, and I can look to grab as much stuff from those people that I possibly can. Because if I can learn from them, not only their wins, but more importantly, the mistakes they made, then I can avoid some of those. I can shortcut the process for myself, and then in the process, I can pour that back into people around me. And so I think the biggest thing is forgetting all the things you think you know, checking your ego at the door, and just deciding to be a student, right? Look for people who resonate with. This is how I found John Maxwell. This is why Jim Rohn was one of my mentors as well, and still is. Zig Ziglar. This is why I read the book Think and Grow Rich every year to this day for 20 years. Like, how do I become a student rather than a teacher? And I think that's one of the biggest things for me, at least personally, that I had to do was just check the ego at the door, realize there's lots to learn, and that I can shortcut the process. Because Jim Rohn's famous for saying you become the average of the 5 people that you spend the most time with. Well, the misconception is they have to be people that you're doing this with. Like my bookshelves are filled with people that I spend a lot of time with, right? And so identify who those people are that share your values, your view on the world, your principles, your heart, like all those things. And then just pour yourself into studying them, learn from them, and then apply what you learn. And your trajectory skyrockets. And I can almost chart that in if I look back at my career.
That's great. What do you say is your unique leadership style and how has it evolved through your career?
Hmm. I don't know as anything that I do is completely unique, to be quite honest with you. But I think if you asked people that have worked on teams with me at different companies, the first is the integrity, right? So we have to have alignment there. And integrity means sometimes if you like Maxwell says, if you mess up, you got to fess up, right? So strong leaders are very quick to come in front of their team and say, I made a mistake. Like I made the wrong choice. I did the wrong thing. Like, but owning it. Like if you mess up, fess up. A lot of people in the outside world look at that and say, "Oh, that's weak. That makes a leader weak." And what it actually does is it endears your people to you more because you're being authentic. You're being human. You're being real. You're opening yourself up and saying, I don't get it right all the time. I don't have an ego. I don't need to check it at the door anymore because I'm figuring this out along with you. But here's where we're going. Here's how we're going to get there. Here are the non negotiables of how we do life every day with our customers and our fellow employees. And if you want to go on that journey, let's go. And we're going to have a great time doing it. So I think that's the one of the things people would say. The second, I like to have fun. Like in the interview process with anybody we're talking to, we purposely will joke around and try to make them uncomfortable because if you're not comfortable having fun in an interview, you're probably not going to last on our team very long, right? We say it all the time that if you're not having fun, you're doing it wrong because we all spend a lot of time working. We all spend a lot of time in this environment with these people. So we need to do a better job of selecting who the right people are that we actually enjoy being around most of the time. And then we need to have fun while we're doing it because teams that don't enjoy each other and don't have fun doing what they're doing, it's no secret the results are absolutely terrible and they diminish over time versus teams that enjoy each other, want to support each other, have fun, look forward to more times than not doing what they're doing on mission. All of a sudden those results can't be beat. So I think it's really comes down to selecting people correctly that are in alignment and then making sure this is a grind. We might as well have fun doing it. And so looking for ways to keep it lighthearted, have fun, but staying on mission.
Right. What experience has helped you the most to become a better leader?
I don't know if it's the one, but one that first came to mind, just as being authentic here and thinking about it, was when COVID happened. So I was working for a company, and I was helping run a sales team across the U.S. So the sales team was in 23 states. We had 200, I'd say it's like 240 or 250 salespeople across the country in these different states, 91 offices. And all of a sudden COVID comes, right? And then in the US, that's all I can speak to because that's my experience, but in the US it was April that year, everything shut down, like stay at home, don't go to the office. Well, that's okay for some industries. It's really tough when you're industry that's making its money based on selling face to face. And so I think that probably was the period of time where I learned the most in terms of leadership for this reason, right? So you've got think about it this way. You've got, if you're in my shoes at that time, I was working at home because the lockdown. At the time, we were in a smaller house. I didn't have an office. I was in my one of my son's bedrooms upstairs. Like you could see his kitty books in the back. Like we all did what we had to do because none of us were planning for it. And I'm sitting there and I'm getting ready to broadcast to all of our people on a call. And what's fascinating is I'll never forget this. I was terrified. Like all the same thoughts were going through my head that were probably going through the partners' heads in the sense that I don't know if we're going to survive this. I don't know how long this is going to go. How in the world do we keep these people motivated and moving forward in a time like this when there's no answers to any questions? If you remember, especially the early days, there were no answers. Like none of us knew. We were
No.
all kind of like living hour by hour, just watching the news and trying to figure out what the heck is going on. And for that's just a defining moment for me because I'll never forget that. I was having all those thoughts. It's like 10 minutes before we go live, and I just had to have a really a stern talk with myself, realizing that the people couldn't afford me to be in that headspace. I don't have to have all the answers, but the people need leadership in those moments more than they do in the good times. And so that just taught me so much because I had to completely shake that off. It's okay. I was taught this by a mentor. He said, as a leader, you're going to feel a lot of the same feels. It's okay to feel those feelings. It's not okay to stay there because your people need a leader. They don't need a cohort. They don't need a buddy. They don't need somebody in their group who's sitting around the water cooler talking about how bad things are and how scary things are. They need somebody out front saying, you know what? We don't have all the answers. And that's what we did. I got on the broadcast and I said, here's the deal. I don't know what this means. I don't know how long it goes. We're learning this hour by hour. That's just being authentic with them, right? But here's what I do know. We're going to be here for you. And so we're going to set up calls going through this. We're going to pour into you. Here's the schedule. Here's what we're going to do to keep you going as we all figure this out together. Right. And so that for me, it was at first I was thinking, oh, it's a weakness because I'm afraid. I'm terrified at the beginning of that because way I look at it is I have 300 plus people with staff counting on me. It's okay to have those feelings, but it's not okay to stay there and let them paralyze you. And so I had to snap out of it and realize that in times like that, people need strong leadership. And it doesn't mean that you have all the answers. It just means that you're out in front being authentic and keeping things moving, even if it's hour by hour, but you're out there in front keeping things moving.
Wow, what an experience.
Yeah,
Like,
it was something. Yeah.
yeah, I can't imagine having like 300 people and then like being resourceful for them. And I don't know. It sounds very scary.
It was a lot, but it truly it did teach me a ton about leadership because I cared so much for those people and still do. So I'm still connected with a lot of them, but because a leader's heart cares, if it's a good leader, cares so much about those people, you feel like you have to have all the answers. And the reality is, most good leaders don't. Most good leaders, there's some points in their week, their month, their year that they're just winging it too. They're totally guessing as well, right? And so why try to hide from that? The way to build authenticity and the way to really connect with the people that you're leading is to just be real with them. That means fessing up when you mess up. It also means if you don't know, being totally fine to say, I have no idea.
So you say, like, I have no idea. I also have these doubts, but then let's just keep going or
Yeah, so just being authentic, saying, I don't know what this means for all of us long term, but what I do know is that we care about you, that you're one of our partners, and that our commitment to you is not going to go away because of whatever's happening with this. I don't know if I should say the word if we get flagged, but if with this pandemic, right? Like, this is not going to change anything. So, in the midst of the unknown, here's what I know: this is an opportunity for us as a company to really double down on the fundamentals. And so we launched regular Zoom trainings. Like we increased our training in our podcasts, in our broadcasts out to our network and our company during that time versus decrease. There were a lot of companies that just pulled everything back. They didn't know what to do, so it's safer to do nothing if you don't know what to do. We went the opposite route. We just doubled down on stuff. We poured more training into them. We would do Zoom happy hours because people were getting starved for social contact. So we literally would all have a beer and sit on our back patio and no business talk, but we just created space for people to just be okay, not being okay, to be okay, not being sure, but understanding that they're with a group of people who are figuring it out together, right? And so I think that was the biggest thing was it's okay to say you don't know, but it's not okay to stay there. They're looking for somebody to lead them. And so you got to figure it out, shake it off, and figure out, I don't know all of this stuff, but what do I know and what can I do in this moment and double down there.
love it. I've never heard, like, I never heard about it, about how leaders also doubt themselves. I never thought about it. I mean, I always thought about a leader and they always have certainty. I didn't know they also doubt themselves or doubt the situation. Like,
Absolutely. Just not many are authentic enough to be able to admit it. But they all do. Like they all have that feeling. I work with leaders across multiple industries, and every single one of them has something at some point that keeps them awake at night that they're worried about, they're unsure about, they're second guessing a decision they made. That's just the human condition, right? That doesn't magically go away when we become a leader. We just learn how to manage it and how to work through it versus being paralyzed by it.
all right. And what do you think are the biggest challenges that most business owners face today as a leader, as leaders?
I think a couple things. And I'm just the context. I'm basing this on what I'm hearing and seeing in the field right now because I'm doing some consulting for a few different groups in different industries. But there are some consistent themes. First, I think a lot of companies, when the market's good, get very complacent on their value proposition. Right when the market's good, consumers, businesses, or whether you're a business to consumer marketer or business to business marketing company, whatever it is, whoever your audience is, I think when the times are good, people get complacent. It's just a natural thing, unfortunately. And so I think right now, what I'm working with a number of companies on is how do we redefine the value proposition of your company? Not erase it, not radically transform it, completely change it, but how do we do more? And sometimes that means stopping doing some of the stuff we're doing because it's not connecting with the audience anymore. But I think like right now we're working with a couple of them. We're completely redefining who the target audience is because what we found is that audience changed post pandemic. It also changed as the economy has slowed a little bit. And it doesn't mean we're not going to market to those other people, but we niched it even more. We got even more specific on who the right person is, who the right audience is, because then we recrafted the value proposition, the marketing, the messaging, everything to speak to that person. It's still out here being marketed to the global audience, but we got really specific on who right now is our ideal customer, who right now, based on behavior, what they do for a living, where they work, how much money they make, like where they live, all of that stuff, really granular, redefine who the audience is. Then through that lens, we look at the value proposition and say what part of the value proposition we have today serves that person and what might be missing. We do a gap analysis. And then at that point, we kind of refresh the brand image. We refresh things, go back to market, don't change it. We don't rename a company. We don't forget the past. We're just becoming, well, who's the next version of this company? What's the 2.0 version of this company versus 1.0? Right? And I liken it the way, because sometimes leaders are great with that. And other times leaders of companies, when I go in, they're very apprehensive about that, understandably. But I bring it up, we all have phones, and the phones have updates on a regular basis. And it's
Right.
1.8, 1.7, 1.92. Like there's just always little dialing up. If we all had the same operating system our first phone had when we first got a cell phone, we'd throw the thing through the window because it's terrible. The experience is not keeping pace with the expectations. And I think that's happening with companies a lot right now. So I'm taking the opportunity for the companies I'm working with right now is really assessing, is our target audience the same or has it changed? Then what do we need to do to tweak or add to our value proposition, which again does sometimes mean we don't need to do some of the stuff we did because nobody cares about it. Without saying the name, I'll give you one quick example. Company I'm working with right now, they have this one thing that they did for every customer for the history of the company. They've always done it. And I asked how many of your people that pay you actually leverage that benefit or that part of your value proposition. Nobody knew, but they were all pretty sure that it was a big percentage. When we actually looked at the data, it was less than 11% of their customers actually engaged with that thing. Yet it was taking a sizable amount of resources, both in people and time. And so again, if nobody's using it, that's fine. They're telling you it's not, it's antiquated. It's like the first version of your cell phone operating system. So let's move the resources from that. Stop doing that and figure out what could we do with those resources instead. So it's not even about spending more. Like most of the companies I'm working with right now, we're a net neutral. We're not spending more money. We're just reallocating it once we figured out who is the right customer today and what is it that they want. Because in that process, we start standing out from the competitors. And when times are good, everyone gets complacent. The problem with complacency is that it kills because we're just noise. We're just like everybody else. And so in
Yes.
markets like these, we have an opportunity to really kind of redefine what the next version of our company is. Not forgetting the past. We're still honoring the past. It got us here, but evolving into that next chapter, that next version of who the company is. These kind of markets are perfect for that because the companies that do that are perfectly poised to take advantage of when the economy starts picking back up. When things start rolling and rocking again, all of a sudden, this company that went through that exercise is polished, prepared, and ready. They're not scrambling. The problem is a lot of companies wait till the market gets good. They don't see the uptick they want, and now they're reacting, right? Because now they're behind the eight ball. They haven't done this process. So when the economy and the market shift like they are now, I see that as a tremendous gift, but it's only going to benefit those who take advantage of it, learn from it, and apply it and execute on it so that they're positioned properly when the market turns.
Yeah, I love this. I also heard that from Alex Ramosi that says when your company is doing great, you have to press even harder the gas pedal.
Yeah, and isn't that interesting? Because the natural tendency for humans, when
It's
things are
to
going
slow.
great, we're like, hey, let's just roll with it. Like it's not broken. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. Like, why would I do it now? That's actually to that point. I would just reread. Have you read the book Unreasonable Hospitality?
No,
Oh, so I just reread it. I've read it a couple times before, but it's like any good book, right? Every time you read it, you're going to take something different from it.
right.
But that was a quick premise of that book. So he set out to build the number one restaurant in the world. And long story short, not no spoiler, you can look it up on Google, so it's not spoiling anything. He got there, he arrived, but the book is really the journey and the lessons he learned. And what was fascinating at the end of the book, he talks about the fact they reached this number one status after years of blood, sweat, and tears, disappointment, setbacks. Like they had a journey. And they get to number one, but he was sitting in his restaurant, number one in the world, sitting in the restaurant, sitting with his partner. He looked around and realized it no longer is in line with what we wanted it to be. And so they completely reinvented the company and the restaurant. Now, a lot of people would have said, "Why would you even try? You're number one in the world. You know, there's no plus one. Like you are at the top of your game in your industry." But instead of getting complacent, they use that as a time to reinvent themselves, redefine, building on the foundation that they had from before that got them there, but understanding that the world is moving so quickly. If we're not moving with it, we get left behind. And that's what's happening to a lot of companies right now.
Yeah, I love it. What personal practices or habits do you engage in to continuously improve yourself as a leader and as a human being?
Mm. So, number one thing I will say is reading, right? Studying, being that student. It's one thing to say I'm a student and say I'm going to be a sponge and I'm open to new ideas. That only works if you're actually cracking books to get the new ideas. And so, it always kills me when I talk to people and I ask them, "Are they reading? What are they reading right now? Are you reading a book right now?" And they say, "Oh no, I'm not a reader." Well, I'm pretty sure you can read because you figured out how to get to this meeting. So you read the instructions. So it's not that you're not a reader. Here's the key. You choose not to read. And what you're saying is you're not worth it to invest the time into yourself. And so for me, it's constantly reading. I'm always reading at least a book or two, always. As soon as I finish one, I start another. And so some months that can be 4 or 5. Some months it's been 10. Some months it's been one because I've reread a book a few times because I really wanted to go deep into the content, right? So I don't get stuck on how many books a year I read, but it's just constantly having my nose in a book, looking for opportunities, ideas, different takes. And you can see the bookshelf behind me, that's a library, right? And so some of these I've read before, but I'll find myself in a situation like, oh, you know what? That was touched on in this book. I'll go find it, reread it, and boom, something completely different. Now that I'm faced with it in the real world, helping a client with something, now all of a sudden it hits different, right? I take something different from it. So I think the number one thing is how much are you pouring into yourself? It's a choice. Like the whole adage, I'm not a reader, that's a choice. You're saying you're not worth it. If you believe that you have capability, if you believe that you have the ability to make other people's lives better, which is what leadership is, then you have a responsibility to carve out the time and set the discipline and the habits to pour into you so that you have something to give to other people.
Love this. Sorry. What's the biggest challenge leaders face today?
Hmm. I think I'll give you my take, but I'll tell you what I hear in the field, and I think it's wrong. The number one thing I hear in the field from leaders is they're terrified of artificial intelligence. Like they're legitimately concerned. Like if you ask a lot of leaders, I think you'd hear some of them say, a few of them, quite a few of them, would say that AI in some way, shape, or form is one of their fears. Um, right. And I think AI is no different. I mean, we heard the same thing when the internet really became a thing. Like it's going to ruin the world. It's going to take over everything. Like it's the sky is falling. Yet here we are. And now most of us couldn't imagine doing like, we wouldn't be doing this without the internet. Right. So I think that the true biggest challenge for most leaders is twofold. First, they've plateaued, they're not growing. And as when you're not growing, it's hard to be receptive to new things. It's hard to be agile, right? It's one of the quickest signs that you've slipped into complacency as a leader is when you start getting fearful of change in the industry and what's happening. It's because you're comfortable and that threatens your comfort zone. That threatens status quo. Good leaders who are constantly evolving, they see something like that and they see it shaking up the board and they get excited because I don't know what it's going to mean, but I know good things will come out of it because I'm going to get ahead of it, right? It's more things for me to learn. It's more things for me to understand. It's more things for me to lead people through. I think the biggest challenge right now is most companies and leaders don't hire people effectively. I don't believe that there's an issue with any certain generational, like there's a lot of talk about, well, this generation and that generation. I think that's all hogwash. Their motives are different. What motivates them is different. And that's the leader's responsibility to understand. But there's incredibly talented people, incredibly hardworking people, and people who are aligned with your values in every generation. The leader's job is to go find those people. And the way we find them is by having a really compelling vision that we're screaming from the rooftops and it will attract the right people. I think the biggest challenge leaders have is themselves or their company. They don't have that North Star, they don't have that compelling vision. And as a result, they're just hiring for a role versus finding people who are aligned for a mission. And I think those are two completely different things.
And what do you think is more important now that you mention it? What is it more important? Mission, vision, or values?
So, your we get this a lot too, right? So your mission is important because that's why we're doing what we're doing. That's what are we setting out to accomplish. The vision is where are we going. So I know a lot of companies, and I'm just telling you why. I'm going to tell you what my answer is. I see vision being the most critical, and I think that's what has the biggest shortage in our business world today. For this reason, I can have a phenomenal mission, but if I don't have a compelling vision showing my people where we're going, then we're just going to sit right where we are. We can be on mission and have flat growth. We can be on mission and go backwards in revenue and have negative revenue and go out of business. We can be on mission all the way through bankruptcy. Without that vision, that North Star that's like drawing people down this path, then I don't think you have much else. And again, that's the leader's responsibility. The leader's job is to be able to set the vision, articulate the vision, and lead to the vision. Because you can have the values, you can have a mission statement, you can have all that stuff, and all of it's important. But if you don't have a destination on the horizon that you're moving people toward, then they're not going to have a job for a long time, right? Because the company's eventually going to go out of business, and they can be perfectly on mission and unemployed at the same time, and that's not what we want for anybody.
All right. What is one behavior? What is one behavioral trait that you have seen derail more leaders' careers?
Ego. 100% without question. You can tell how fast that came to my mind. Ego. I see it all the time. Leaders that get to the position and think only they have the right answers. Leaders that get into a position have really talented people around them, but because they're so dogmatically set on their vision, on their way of thinking, on where they're going, they don't hear voices from anybody else. And the problem with that is leaders who have that approach begin losing good leaders around them because good leaders around them will go find another leader who wants their opinion, who wants to be collaborative. Because as a leader, I have ideas, no question. Like you have ideas for your business. We all have ideas. But what I also know is I'm not completely objective if it's my business, and neither are you for yours. And so as a leader, I want to find a way to surround myself with people. And this is why the integrity and the values are so important. Because as long as we're aligned with our values and our integrity, I don't want people that just go along with everything I say. What's the point of paying them if that's the case? I can have a virtual assistant do that for me. I want a team surrounding me as a leader that pushes back, that says, hey, I don't think we thought about that. What about this? Have you considered that approach? Hey, I like this part of the idea, but I see a challenge over here. That's what true leaders, good leaders, effective leaders should want. The problem is when poor leaders are so caught up in their ego, they don't like to be wrong. They don't want collaboration. They want people who just blindly execute what they say. And again, this goes back to one of your first questions. In my mind, in my definition, that person's not a leader, they're a manager. They're looking for compliance. They're not looking to draw the best out of people. Good leaders are perfectly okay understanding that their idea likely won't survive contact with the leaders around them. Yet, what comes out of that contact is probably better than the original idea in the first place, right? But that requires humility. I can't have ego and see the world that way and want that outcome.
What are a few resources that you would recommend to someone looking to gain insight into becoming a better leader?
Well, I get nothing for saying this, so this is not a sales pitch, but I would absolutely read everything Maxwell's got. I would read everything Jim Rohn has, and I think Zig Ziglar is right up there for me as well. Now, there's lots of other people you could go to, but foundationally, those are the ones that resonate with me in terms of how we see the world, our values for how we live in the world, and as a result, that's who I've learned a lot from. You all pick your own, but those are the three I would say: Maxwell, Jim Rohn, and Zig Ziglar. It's hard to go wrong with those three.
Thank you. If you were going to leave one piece of advice for future leader generations, what would you say to them?
In my world, the advice I would give to people is that every day, your job as a leader is to figure out how can I make my people better. It's not to solve all their problems. It's not to answer all their questions. It's not to have all the answers for the business challenges or questions. My goal as a leader every day is figuring out how can I make these people better incrementally, right? I'm not going to take somebody who is a 0 and make them a 100 in a day, but I can take them from a 0 to a 3, or I can take them from a 20 to a 21. Like incremental improvements When a leader wakes up every day and understands that they are a steward of the people that they have around them on their team, and when they say, okay, as a result, I'm going to be a good steward of these people, I'm going to look for ways to make them better. In my experience, at least, everything else figures itself out. It's not without hard work. It doesn't mean there's not bumps. But when I have that mindset and I'm looking at my people that way, inspired people, growing people, happy people always produce good outcomes. The problem is a lot of companies see employees as a necessary evil rather than their biggest asset, right? And so if you look at your company and you look at your liabilities and your asset column, I'm going to pour everything I can into the asset side of the thing, understanding they help me avoid or decrease or limit the number of liabilities. That's how I see the team. And so every day when I get up, hey, is there a lot I could do? Yes. And is there sometimes the day gets away from you? Of course, that's real life. But every day when I get up, when I've got a team of people working with me, the question is, what can I do to make them better? Not necessarily their job easier, not necessarily do their work for them, but how can I make them as a person better? Because if they're on a path of growth, they're going to bring other people with them. And all of a sudden now we have a movement in the company that helps us weather a lot of storms.
Nice. And just to finish our interview, I would like to ask you, what do you think life is all about? How does leadership take its place there?
I think life is about legacy, right? I think the reality is we look back at this, and I don't know about you, but I'm at a stage of life now where I've got friends who are unfortunately starting to pass away, cancer and all kinds of terrible stuff, way too young, right? But it brings it into perspective and reminds me, at least, of how short this whole experiment we call life really is. And that none of us are guaranteed tomorrow. Like, we don't know what tomorrow brings. And so every day, the best you can do is to leave that day having made someone better. Because what matters to me is what does the world look like when I'm not here? Is it going to be better for me being here? Or is there going to be no noticeable benefit? I'm not okay with no noticeable benefit, and it's not driven by ego. It's driven by mission and purpose. Like, I want to make everyone around me better for being in my world. And so I think that's the number one thing. Again, if you focus, you have your priorities correct as a leader, stuff starts lining up, right? When people genuinely know that you care, they enjoy being in your circle, they'll fight to be on your team at different companies. Results will show. Results are the easy part. It's all this stuff that a lot of people want to shortcut because it's hard work, it's time, it's different than conventional wisdom, but it pays off dividends. So for me, it's legacy. It's how can I leave this whole thing, whether it's a company I just left or was at, or whether it's when I leave this world, how can I leave it better for being here? That's my motivating factor.
Love it. This was a wonderful conversation. I really enjoyed talking to you and learning from you. Is there something else you would like to say?
No, I would just say I appreciate being here. Thank you for being persistent. What your audience may not know is you win like the A+ star for persistence because I've been crazy busy and you were persistent. You didn't give up, which I admire and I love that. And I think we can all learn from that. But no, love the opportunity. Hopefully, people got something from this and just awesome, awesome being with you.
Thank you, Ben. If people are listening to this and want to learn more from you, where can they get in touch with you? How can they find you in social media?
Yeah, everything's one spot, benfairfield.com, just my name, benfairfield.com, and they can link off to everything from there.
Once again, thank you, and I hope to see you soon.
Awesome. Thank you so much.